Thank you. Welcome. It is so exciting to see so many friendly faces. We have got a powerhouse panel here today. My job is mostly to keep time and stay out of the way. I am a massive thriller fan. I grew up reading whatever was in the house, so I was, Len Dayton and James Clavell and all of those people. So I am very, very excited to be here. I think the thriller has gone through some changes, and we're going to talk about that. But I'm going to step back and ask everyone to introduce who they are, what they write, and then, a little bit about how you got started. Let's start with Marc.
Okay, so I am Marc Dawson, and I've written 50 books now, something like that. John Milton series is the one I'm best known for.
Closer.
Not actually, it's not actually on. How's that? Better?
Yeah, better.
Okay. All right, I'll start again. So I am Marc Dawson. I wrote the John Milton series, Isabella Rose, Beatrix Rose, Atticus Priest. I've been doing this for 10 years now, sold 6 million books. And
6 million books.
Still, absolutely, love the opportunity to do, to basically get paid for doing something I do anyway as a hobby. So, pretty amazing. But yeah, love it.
I am J.F. Penn now. Here is J.F. Penn, not Joanna Penn. I write action-adventure thriller. I write fantasy thriller, crime thriller, dark fantasy, horror, all kinds of things. I write all over the place. That's probably one thing that makes my writing a bit different. I did my first novel, I started in NaNoWriMo, 2009. First self-published in 2011. My fiction, but I've always been an indie since 2008. So yeah, I've been doing this quite a long time now.
Good morning. My name is Nick Thacker. I write action-adventure thrillers in the vein of Dan Brown, James Rollins, Clive Cussler. I have to be honest, I was kind of freaking out this morning because I know all these guys, and I'm like, I'm comfortable with them. And then I got up here and I saw some of the faces out there, and I'm like, you're better at it than I am. You guys should be up here. But it reminded me of a truism that I hope you guys all agree with me on, and that is there's always something more to learn, and there's always another level. And so I'm here, like you are, trying to get to that next level and trying to learn something new.
I'm Diane Capri. I write mystery thriller suspense. I'm probably best known for my Hunt for Jack Reacher series. I had a new book released yesterday. Yay, yeah. This is my 17th novel in that series. And then I also write, I have a mystery series that I write, Judge Willa Carson, and I have the Jess Kimball thrillers, and I wrote a 4-book cozy mystery series not too long ago, too. So just kind of mystery thriller suspense is sort of me. And they're kind of all the same, actually. I mean, if you read one, you've read them all, kind of. And it's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to pass the baton over to my friend Marc.
Thanks, Anna. So my name is Marc Cameron. I'm a retired Deputy United States Marshal turned writer. I write probably, I hate to say that I'm best known for that, but I probably am best known for writing the Jack Ryan novels for the last 7 for the Clancy estate. I write my own Jericho Quinn thriller series about a OSI agent that rides a really super cool motorcycle. I ride a really super cool motorcycle, but my son was an OSI agent, and I'm not nearly as super cool as he is. But I did write I do write now, and I've stepped away. My last Clancy / Jack Ryan will be out in the end of this, actually week after next, and that will be my 7th. Mark Graney, who actually recommended me for the gig, only did 7, and I felt it was only appropriate that I didn't I didn't do more than Mark. So I've stepped away from that to focus more on the Arliss Cutter series, which, conveniently enough for my research, is about a deputy marshal based in Alaska.
Awesome. So my question, I flagged questions for people, but anybody can pick up a question that they want to pick up. So I know for a romance, you need lovers. For a murder mystery, you need a dead body, we think. Thrillers, what is a must-have trope or tropes for thrillers? Joe?
Well,
I did tell you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think it's about what you like And for me, I like, when you said one dead body, that's not enough for me. So, like for one of my novels, Crypt of Bone, is for the quote from Revelation, "A quarter of the world must die." So that is basically, I was like, oh, how do I kill a quarter of the world?
God, that's like post-apoc.
No, this is not quite post-apoc, this is pre-apoc.
Okay. Okay.
So for me, thriller is about, there's a worldwide threat that's going to kill us all, and Morgan Sierra is going to stop it and save the world. So for me, that is the classic big thriller trope. But I know that's not for everyone, but that's basically what I write.
And so does your hero always save the world?
Of course.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Diane?
Well,
Oh.
sorry, she did tell us, and I'm sorry. Sometimes I'm just a little slow. This is early for me. Do we have any other people who don't wake up at this hour? I mean, yeah, exactly. So, Nick's offering me vodka. I should take it, right? For me, I've said this before, you've probably heard me say this before, the classic trope for me for thrillers is a good guy, a bad guy, and a ticking clock.
Yes.
And that is basically what a thriller is. I've got a hero and, a terrible villain. My view is that the villain has to be as strong or stronger than the hero, and the whole point is how the hero, saves the day against odds that are overwhelming. So a good guy and I always want my good guys to be good guys. If they're girls, I want them to be good girls, I mean, and we can talk about what that means. But anyway, and then the ticking
Talk about
clock.
what that means.
What, a good girl?
Yeah.
Not what my mother would say it is.
Yes.
Yeah. A good hero to me is one that has skills, abilities, talents, and can use those in the course of the story to beat the dastardly villain. And my villains are very dastardly, so my good girl has to be maybe definitely not usually stronger. The guys are always stronger, okay? And so we can't have, like mud wrestling or anything like that. So she has to be clever, and she has to have a lot of assets she can marshal.
Awesome.
And then the ticking clock, my books usually last about 48 hours. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but there's a constant ticking clock, and to me that is the biggest struggle. That's the thing that you asked me about.
Mm-hmm.
I keep a whole big timeline, and and my big thing is they move all over. So how do you get them from here to there, and this much time, and so that's what I would say the classic thriller trope is.
Great. So we've got good guy, bad guy, ticking clock. Let's go to bad guys. Who wants to talk about villains? Who is your favorite villain, Mark?
A lot of people ask me, because I was in law enforcement for about 30 years. You must have been, I see some former coppers out there and present coppers. You must have known a million evil people. Well, really, that's not true. I've known a lot of, my son and my youngest son was in law enforcement up until just a few weeks ago when he took another job with the federal government because of better retirement. But he was in law enforcement for about 10 years, and we had a lot of philosophy talks. And we kind of did a little informal count and figured I'd arrested maybe just shy of 1,000, maybe 900 people over the course of my career.
Wow.
And I could probably count and it's subjective, but I could probably count the evil ones on both hands. Now, many of those 800,000 or 900,000, whatever, had done evil things, but they were people. They were the heroes of the movie in their mind, right? I remember one of my favorite villains, real quick story, I want to pass the mic quickly, but when I first got to Anchorage, I was a young POD, plain old deputy, didn't have any, supervisory jobs or anything like that. And I was on a warrant, so I was new, I didn't know my way around. It was daylight, and it was, 11 o'clock at night, and I was like on a perimeter team, and we were looking for this guy, and he ran into one of our local bars. And this bar, look it up on Yelp, it's called Chilkoot Charlie's or Coots. The first, anybody that's ever been there, I think the first or second Yelp review said, people have died here. And so he ran into this guy, took off on foot, which we love, by the way. Our predator drive kicks in, so he took off on foot, and ran into Coots, and he was, darting through, and it's really crowded in there, and there's panties on the wall and dollar bills, and we're running, and I just happened to be in the position to be the one right behind him. And so I'm jumping through this labyrinth and going after him, and he's my bad guy, right? So he goes through a kind of a hanging, some like quilts through the Russian room and through another room, and he goes through, and then I lose him in the crowd, and there's a closed door and lights below the door and a murmur behind there and lots of kind of a woofer playing. Like a good policeman that I was, I crashed through the door into the unknown, and this close from me to Diana is a girl in panties and a bra with halibut hooks through the skin of her back, and another girl is behind her with halibut hooks through the skin of her back in a chain, and they're pulling to see who can pull the other one over a line. And as I walked through the door, or I crashed into the door, and this lady with kind of a bob hairdo, kind of a Captain Kangaroo looking hairdo, if you will, dark hair, really sultry looking, quite, sorry Vicky, my wife's not here, bodacious woman, and she reaches out to me because she wanted help, and she goes, she didn't say anything, she's like, pull on my hand so I can win. Oh. I saw my bad guy dart out the back door. I ignored her as best I could and ran, and then some other guys actually got the guy as he crashed out the back. She became one of the fiercest, meanest. I don't even know her. I don't know if she even won. I hope she did. But she became, through that little bit of inspiration, one of the meanest, bad ladies in any of my books.
Awesome. Mark. Okay. So we're still doing villains. Talk about villains.
Thanks for that. That's Jesus. What do I say after that? Christ. Actually, I'm actually lost for words. Right. So, villains. I've got nothing like that. I've got nothing. I would say for me, villains. So there are the kind of the scenery-chewing supervillains who are trying to blow the world up, like the one kind of Joe's villains. And then there are, I don't know what the fuck Mark's villains are, but that's kind of weird. But for me, it's it's got to feel kind of. I'm a smaller scale writer, so I like my bad guys to be kind of mundane, to have traits and foibles that we can all recognize, and to feel really realistic. And I think that kind of that's the kind of evil that sticks with me. It's the kind of, it could be your neighbor, it could be someone down the street. I find there's a lot of tension in that kind of character, and I want my readers to feel that the bad guys could be their neighbors. It's got to feel that it's immediate and possible.
So we're all paranoid all the time.
Yeah, I think that kind of, I like that kind of low buzz of anxiety. I think it's something that I try to put into my Milton books. And for me, just, I find the kind of the broader canvases are quite hard for me to write, and I prefer kind of more of a portraiture kind of a situation. But it's a spectrum, isn't it? There are bad guys, and then there are bad guys, and I'm kind of on the lower end of the scale, I guess.
Outstanding. So I come at this from a craft. Yeah, Nick, it's you. I come at this from a craft perspective. Do your good guys and bad guys complement each other, parallel each other? Like, how do you set that dynamic up? What attributes do they bring that push each other forward in the narrative?
For me, I want my antagonist and protagonist, if I'm doing my job well, I almost want them to have the same goal. They want the same thing.
Yes.
But the reasons they want it and the means to which they get to that end have to be very contradictory and usually
Can you
brutal.
talk about two characters that you've written?
No, because I don't think I do this very well. But I'll answer the previous question
Yes.
by way of doing that. And I was starting to learn how to write. I'm still learning, but it was early in my career. There was a show called Heroes, a television show called Heroes, and I loved loved is kind of a weird word. The antagonist was done really well. The guy's name was Siler, played by Zachary Quinto, right? Just really, really great acting. But as you watch the series progress, you start to get, they do flashbacks and all that, but you start to understand where he's coming from and the why behind what he does. And yet, obviously, he's still very much a bad guy. And well, I don't think you should cut people's brains open, but I get why you do it. You know? And so I try to remind myself of that when I write an antagonist, write a villain. You know, they can't be the caricature, you know,
Right.
twirly mustached bad guy that cackles. You know, they have to be believable. And as I said, I don't think I do this very well, so I usually just use Nazis. Everything comes back to Nazis.
We're going to talk about self-talk and not talking yourself down. Diane, do you want to talk about the ticking clock?
Kate wanted me to talk about ticking clock, and she wanted me to
Closer.
talk about how you actually put the ticking clock on the page. Because, I mean, the reader needs to feel that sense of, we are running out of time here. You know, are we going to get there? Will she arrive first? Will he arrive first? What will happen? And so I thought about this. I'm saying like Nick. I don't know that I do this very well.
Stop,
okay.
stop. No more
Okay,
bad
all right.
self-talk.
All right, so what do I do? So, yeah, more vodka. That is always Nick's answer, more vodka. So what I really do is, years ago, there was a professor at, I think, Kansas, Dwight Swain, is that where he was? Oklahoma, okay. And he wrote a book called Techniques of Selling Fiction, I think it was called. Techniques of, okay, do you want to do this part? I know. So he said, that your scene should have a certain structure, and that the structure in this instance was goal, conflict, disaster. Okay? So what's going to happen in this scene? What's the goal? What's the conflict? What's the problem? How is this not going to happen? And then there needs to be a disaster at the end. And in my case, it has to happen fast. So you've heard me say before probably, I use a lot of cheap tricks, which Nick says are techniques of selling fiction. And one thing is I write short chapters, short sentences, short paragraphs, and I make it move quickly. So the reader has the feeling that they're moving fast, even though the book is however many thousand words. So I start out with the goal, and I'm writing, we're going to do this, and then it's, oh my God, how could that happen? And then, the floor just opened up and swallowed us all, and then, and then there's a disaster after that. And I do that with short sentences, short paragraphs, short words. I try not to use any, my vocabulary's okay. I mean, I'm not, Joe Thesaurus, but I try to use short words so that people don't have to really think about it too much. And then they can just zoom right past. And whatever it is I'm doing, it does seem to work because readers say all the time that it's really fast-paced fiction, and they really, they read it quickly. And they'll come to me and they'll say, I read that book in one night, and I'm like, read it again, because it really took me a long time to write that.
Yeah, so I would add to that, so I was, in another life, I was a book coach, and that goal attack thwart, the tighter that is, the more often that hits the page, the faster paced your novel is going to be. So for literary fiction, it can be spread over a big canvas, but for a thriller, it's probably going to be scene by scene or chapter by chapter. Great stuff, really great stuff. All right, so I think I did this, who wants to talk about, we're going to shift slightly to process. If you had a TARDIS, if only we had a TARDIS, and you could go back in time, what would you say to your starting out thriller writer self? Mark?
Oh, I think we all learn as we go along to not be afraid of writing really crappy first drafts, to not try to make it perfect. And I'll finish answering this, but I do want to say on behalf of all the twirly mustache people, we're not all villains, right? Okay. But I writing a really cruddy first draft, and I think it took me about half, so I've only written about 25 books, and it took me about halfway through to realize that, I think Stephen King does this, several other people do this, when I get up to end a writing day, I end on the metaphorical, sometimes literal, backswing of a punch. So that when I come back to write, it's not boring. It calls me back. I want to know what's going to happen in that scene. Now, there has to be some exposition. Otherwise, sometimes I'll try to get it going so fast that my wife will say, you think you put this in here, but it's not in here. We don't know what that is. So you have to write some exposition. I like to show exposition in action, but those two things I think I didn't know, and I muddled through quite a bit in the beginning. So don't be afraid to write crap. You can't fix a blank page. And stop your day in the middle of the highest action you can.
How do you get your wife to read your books?
She, it was hard for her at first, but now that that's the way we make our living, she's very critical. And I think I told this last year, but those of you that have friends and significant others that read your work, it's terrifying, right? And she's a retired English teacher and social studies teacher, so if we're in the same room together, I won't leave her alone. It's like, what, and she's like, what, was that a good part, right? And at one point, I'm sitting over in it was winter in Alaska, so we're all huddled around the nice little fireplace, and I was writing away, and she was reading. She likes to read the printed word, and she lowers her, and I could hear the rustle of the paper lowering down. So she was looking across the top of it, and I stopped my writing on the computer, and she looked at me and she said, "How do you know so much about prostitutes?"
Joe, you've got a TARDIS, you're going back in time. So your journey is very interesting because you've moved into the shadow work, and I don't know if you'd have started that earlier or like...
I guess the original question was the TARDIS question, and I would tell myself, and I almost need to tell myself now, and a few people have said that this resonates, is that I'm an intuitive discovery writer. And if I could have told myself back in 2009 that that's what I am, I wouldn't have spent more than a decade literally reading every book on plot, taking every single bloody course on how to plot things, and going, why can I not do this? Why can't I just sit down and plot something in order? Why do I have to just come up with all these ideas, these crazy things, and then wrangle the chaos into what is how I write? And I think I only embraced this fact. Becca Syme, you all know Becca Syme, her book, Dear Writer, Are You Intuitive? If you feel like, if you're resonating with what I'm saying right now, please read that book, because I was just like, oh my goodness, I think I'm a discovery writer who is intuitive. And so I wanted to encourage those of you who feel the same way, and a few of you are nodding. So basically, if you can't force the plot, and you can't, people say, I know all this about my characters. I'm like, I don't. I mean, I just sit down and this stuff happens. And for me, being a fiction writer, being a thriller writer, is about fun. Like, I love Indiana Jones. I love all those action adventures. But Con Air is my favorite movie. Nicolas Cage in the Face-Off era, yes, please. I mean, that's what I try and capture in my book. So I guess I wanted to say that to my younger self, and also to you guys, if anyone's trying to force a way to write that's not actually you, I hope that helps you, and I do wish I could have told that to myself.
Great. Do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I think I would probably have told myself to not try to be someone else. I think when I was starting out, I loved Bret Easton Ellis, still love Bret Easton Ellis. I loved people like Jane McInerney, and tried very hard for a long time. I thought it was very important that I wrote a book that was going to win prizes, and they'd kind of shower me with garlands. And I'd actually rather be showered with money, personally. I think that's much more, paying my mortgage is more important to me than winning prizes. And it took me quite a long time to realize that. And I did kind of look down my nose, perhaps, at kind of amazing craftsmen like Lee Child, for example, who is an amazing writer. And it took me quite a long time to get off my high horse and realize that he is an absolutely stupendously talented writer.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think it would have been to not try to be someone else. I think it's fine when you're starting to kind of mimicry is not necessarily a bad thing. You can learn a lot about your style and your process, but I think having the confidence to write for me and to trust my voice took me quite a long time to realize, but it was a really important stage when I kind of made that discovery that it was okay to just be me.
So who wants to pick up this? I don't know who wants to pick up. What does future you say to now you? So Jo was on SPF with James, and she talked about her 15-year plan. And my
No,
brain
But I think, just to be clear, so when I said my 15-year plan, I've done 15 years as an indie, and there's been a business model for 15 years. And I was talking about my next 15-year business model, which is Kickstarter, Shopify, writing even weirder stuff.
But it's still a 15-year plan.
So it's not really a plan, it's more a 15-year direction. So I don't want to, because I'm an intuitive discovery business person too. And I'm like, I really feel I should do a book on Gothic cathedrals, which is what's coming next year. So it doesn't really fit, but hey, I'm intuitive. That's my excuse.
What I would say,
Bit closer.
if I could, is to my, is it like future self? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I forget that when I put the book out there, I don't know what's going to happen to it. I don't know if people are going to read it and love it or hate it or what. And I have, every now and then I have to remind myself, I have no control over that. And sometimes they really do hate it, and so they let me know that. And then sometimes I get surprised by emails from readers. And I'm going to tell you one I just got last week that just really, as the Brits say, I was very chuffed about this. This guy wrote to me. He's from Sweden, he said. And he was writing because I give people a free book if they sign up to my newsletter. I've been doing that for years, same free book for 11, 12 years now. Probably Mark Dawson told me to do that, so I've been doing that for a long time. And so this guy wanted the free book, and when I give him the free book, I send him a quick email. He probably told me to do that too. And in the email, I try to get them to respond to me. So I say, let me know where you buy your books. So this guy responded in this email, and he said, I've been a fan for a long time.
Yes.
And he's just now joining my newsletter list.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I have read 45 of your books. And he said, and I said to him, I don't think my mother's read 45 of my books. And he said, and this will be my 46th. And he signed his name. And so, I have no idea this guy is out there. Mm-hmm. And, and he's reading my books, and he liked them well enough to keep going. So you just don't know. You put your heart and soul into it. You do the best you can. You put it out there. You think that it's a good story. Otherwise, you wouldn't release it, right? And then you just have to take your chances and see what happens, I think. And that's something I constantly forget, because I always think I can control that, and I really can't.
So let's switch into some of the things that you can control. Nick, do you want to talk to things I know nothing about, which is marketing? You want to talk a bit about marketing?
I'm not convinced anybody knows anything about marketing.
I think this guy does.
Well, they say half of advertising fails. We just don't know which half. So it's all tongue-in-cheek, but that's so true. What I've come to believe is that, very simply, marketing is testing, and that's it. I know that doesn't sound like that's it, but that really is it, guys.
So tell me what you test.
Everything. Everything is tested.
Tell me what everything means.
If you're doing ads, for example,
okay.
Platforms can be tested. Which one works better? But then each platform needs to be tested with creatives, images, videos, whatever the platform needs. Headlines, text, whatever you're using to create that ad. The link, where are you going to send them? Is it going to go to Amazon or a website? That's a very, very big question. Mm. All of that stuff can be tested. And I think what I teach this a lot. I know Mark does, Joe, all of us, When I talk to an author that says this doesn't work, a lot of times, without digging into their stuff, I can predict that they probably haven't given it a fair test. Mm. And unfortunately, these days, those fair tests can be expensive. If we're trying to learn a new ad platform, you're not going to figure out if that works for you at $5 a day for 4 days.
Right.
It's just, I wish that were true. I wish that weren't true, but that's just the way it is. So marketing is testing. And if I can, very quickly, when I talk to somebody about marketing, I believe that there's really 3 buckets all of us authors should be focused on. I had somebody come up and said, I want to test a billboard ad. I said, hey, well, everything should be tested, right? But listen, if you don't have these 3 things in place, don't be messing with billboard ads. Mm. The 3 things are social media, email marketing, and advertising. Social media is branding. That's all it is these days. It's just branding. And most of us hate social media for different reasons. But if you want to have a very thorough base foundation of marketing, you don't have to do social media, but don't do the billboard ad until you get social media unlocked, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the 3 buckets that I always say. Get those down, figure those out, test those, get them running, and then talk to me about billboard ads.
Wow, that's like a mini course in marketing for me. Mark. Yes.
Don't do any of that.
Billboard ads don't work. I've tried that. That was pretty good. No, it's funny. I mean, I had Atticus was given a big release last year. It was in the Richard and Judy Book Club, which is kind of like Oprah in the States. And it did really well, and the publishers, Welbeck, said, look, do you want to do a billboard ad? And I was like, I don't think that's going to make any difference at all. But it was a good photo shot. It was a good me standing in front of a billboard. It felt like a kind of a rite of passage in some ways that I'd always wanted my books on the side of a bus. I haven't done that yet, but it won't shift. It's not trackable. Another thing I've done, I was on BBC Breakfast News once after the Novichok poisoning in Salisbury. I was writing a book. It wasn't a million miles away from that. And so I flew up to Manchester, did Breakfast News. This is like, I don't know, at least 1 million people would have watched me. And the thing with, I was in the taxi on the way home. I really enjoyed doing the TV. It was very entertaining. It was, sitting in the green room with famous people was great. But as I was going in the taxi home, I thought, well, I can see how many copies have shifted. And I'm not kidding, 0. It made no difference at all. So when people tell you about, you need a billboard ad, or you should be on TV or radio, most of that is vanity. It doesn't really move the needle. I'd much rather put together a very focused advertising campaign using Facebook ads, for example. So an example of that, at the moment, Atticus is set in Salisbury, where I live, and I've got a Facebook campaign going to Salisbury and the 10 miles around it, so it's hyper-local. And I've got a good relationship with the Waterstones branch in Salisbury, so there's lots of books, they stock them, it's at the front of the store, I go in and sign them frequently, and they've sold 1,500 copies, and that's in one store in a 60,000 population city. And I'm actually getting recognised in Salisbury now. I was in the bank and they go, "Are you Mark Dawson?" That's me. So and Nick's right. It is testing is important. Not everything will work, and don't think that the things you might think from kind of what you've been told before, like billboard ads and things, that they're going to be game changers. They definitely won't be.
Outstanding. So, Mark, I don't know if you liked my question about the history of thrillers and how they've changed, how pacing has changed, what's changed while you've been doing it. I'm super interested, but I didn't know if you wanted to pick that one up.
Sure, that's a really good question, especially writing for a legacy author like Tom Clancy. I've, as I said, just stepped away, but I've talked to the new guys, Andrews and Wilson, that are picking up the torch after me, and also to a couple of the writers that did the Jack Ryan Juniors while I was writing the Jack Ryan Seniors. And I talked to Mark Graney about this beforehand, and when we found out, incidentally, you don't ask to do this, it comes out of the blue. So my wife and I were on the beach in Florida researching an Arliss Cutter book, one of my novels. Actually, we were just laying on the beach, but we were there to research that area where he grew up, and I got the call from my agent, and so we became, after a near stroke from freaking out for getting this job out of the blue, we had to become Tom Clancy experts. Now, I was a Tom Clancy fan since The Hunt for Red October came out, but we went and read everything, we reread everything, my wife would read one during the day, I was writing during the day, and then I would read another one at lunch, and then at night she would read a Mark Graney Tom Clancy to me. So we read all of them over the period of a few months. And even though I'd read them all before, I noticed that it had changed. Readers had changed. I had changed. So where Tom Clancy, and Without Remorse, could take a page and a half to describe a K-bar knife, we won't put up with that nowadays. And so when I would talk to the newer writers or the other writers, I would say our job is to make readers feel the way Tom Clancy made them feel. And the way to do that is to write a different book. If Tom Clancy, who is a brilliant man, if he were alive today, he would write a different book. They have to be more, now Clancy readerships like a bit of more technical jargon. When somebody emails, I don't read reviews. I like getting them, but I don't read them. I think it's just a waste of our time. But I do read the emails. And when an email comes to me and says, there's just too much technical jargon in this, I'm thinking, well, you're reading a Clancy, come on. But I would just say that more than anything, we as readership who are dealing with a compulsion loop, we're dealing with people that play games, that are on their phones all the time, that are lost in scrolling on 15-second silly reels about jumping sugar gliders or honey gliders, which I watched this morning when I should have been writing. So we've changed as a reader, and I think we as writers have to change as well.
Awesome. We are going to open it up to Q&A, so line up, and we're going to pass around a mic. Who wants to ask a question?
We actually have a question from the Facebook audience to get us started today.
Great.
They would like to know what the role of mystery is in the thriller genre. Specifically, how much mystery do you mix into your thrillers, or do your readers know who the bad guy is right from the beginning?
Go.
For me, and I'll answer this as me, they'll probably have different answers. I want a thriller to have a bad guy evident to the reader right at the beginning. In a mystery, the bad guy becomes evident at the end. And of course, both of those can involve different people who you might think is the bad guy throughout the book, but that's really the difference for me.
Diane?
I have, some of my books, probably a lot of them, actually open with the villain. Now, I might not tell you who the villain is. I might not tell you his name. I might try to obfuscate his identity somewhat. But we have a villain right away. Because remember my mantra, good guy, bad guy, ticking clock. And since I'm typically writing a series, I'm not writing a standalone, we all know who the good guy is, right? So I'll typically, not typically, but often I'll start with the villain right away. But mystery, in my opinion, every single book that's written should have a mystery in it. Because if there's no mystery to it, even literary fiction, if there's no mystery to it, why the hell am I reading? Okay? I want to know what happens. I want to have something interesting. I want to be excited. Even like Hunt for Red October, which I thought was one of the best books ever, and the movie was great, there was a mystery there, and the mystery was, what the hell is going on? And how are they going to get out of this? This is just, So to me, every book should have suspense, every book should have mystery, and then thriller, we need some excitement as well, in my view.
Joe, were you reaching? Did you want to answer that?
Oh, no, there was someone else had a question.
All right. Okay, come to the mic. And if anybody else wants to, they're keeping us on a timer that is going to flash red at me at some point. And so if you want to line up behind the mic. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. My question deals with research, because sometimes what cripples me when I'm starting to flesh out my thriller series is like, I don't know much about the exactness of being an FBI profiler. And then sometimes I stop because I'm like, I don't even know how to start my research. So my question is, do you do a lot of research beforehand and then sprinkle it in? Do you just start writing and then figure, okay, I'm going to tackle my research as I go? How do you handle the research?
Who wants to take that?
Okay, so I do a lot of research, tons. I can really go down the rabbit hole and stay there way too long. I look for things that are just like, okay, do school buses have 4 tires or 6, I mean, that's, can you really fly nonstop from Washington, D.C. to Colorado Springs in 4 hours and 20 minutes if you leave at midnight? I do all kinds of stuff like that, and you can really get bogged down. And so I kind of try to not get bogged down. So what I'll do, if I can't find it right away or I can't figure it out right away, I'll just say, the school bus had a lot of tires, I mean, because otherwise you just get so stuck. But you do, I have a lot of readers who are into the technical things, and they will let me know. And I've also learned that I have to be kind of not too clever. So like I said, a U.S. Marshal wore his uniform, by which I meant he wore a suit. But some guy wrote to me to say that U.S. Marshals do not wear uniforms. I'm like, well, right, but, So next time I said, the U.S. Marshal was dressed in a suit, So yeah, research is important, I think.
And don't forget, it's a different part of your brain. So if you want to do, the tires bit, you can do XX, because when you're in the creative part of your brain, you don't want the logic part to be driving you. It will slow down your writing. So do a different pass. Do 2 passes and just use XX for the things you have to fill in. Yeah. Question?
Yes. My question is about long series and entry points for new readers. And so I know that thrillers, like, often, what's the balance between, book 19 of my person that's been around forever and a reader being comfortable joining on book 18 or 17 versus turning something new together and starting at a book 1 for a new entry point for readers? Do you feel like there's a trade-off there?
Can you do it?
Yeah, I've got 23 books in the Milton series, so I mean, I'm always marketing the first book because I think logically one would assume it makes more sense for a reader to start at the start. And even though that series was written 8 years ago, it's new to everyone who hasn't seen it before. So I wouldn't worry too much about, generally I would direct your marketing to the first book. But, I try to write generally, they're standalones within a kind of a continuing arc. So you probably could read the 7th Milton book and you'd learn fairly quickly who he is and what he is trying to do in this particular book. But there will be through lines that run from the first book to the last book, and that could be emotional development as a character, or it could be, I've started to experiment a bit with what I call kind of open loops between book 15 and 16. So the bad guy in book 15 might get away with it in book 15, but you know that Milton will catch him or her at the end of book 16. And those, I mean, they're not really cliffhangers, but you will get complaints from readers if you do that too bluntly, but they can be quite effective for marketing.
Great. Next question.
Hey guys. First-time writer, so forgive the naivety of this question if there is any. It's regarding more of the pacing, but in particular chapter pacing. The Mysteries and the Pattersons, they do a 5-page chapter. Well, I grew up on the Ludlums of the world and Clancy, and you didn't have to worry about length. Is it more important today to kind of keep your chapter shorter so that people can flip, quicker, through, even if it's the same information, but you're basically breaking it down?
Okay, I try to keep my chapters these days about 5 pages. I have 5 manuscript pages. That comes out a little longer when it goes into the book. So what I do is I write the scene, and this whole scene might take 25, 30 pages, but then I go back and I look at points where I can leave a hook, and I want them to turn that page. That's my big goal. I want from the time they start till the time they get done, if they don't even get to go to the bathroom, I'm happy. Okay, so that's a pacing thing, like she asked me earlier. So I'll look through and I'll go about 5 pages, and I look for a point where there's kind of a sort of a opportunity for a break, where there's a hook or something coming up, and then I'll cut the chapter there and start the next chapter at the very next line. So that's how I do it.
Yeah, every chapter, opening hook, rising tension, question asked, question answered, closing hook. Every chapter. All right, they were fabulous. Let's say thank you. Good job. Really good job. Well done. And I'm